Welcome back, guys. Today it is Tuesday. We are approaching the end of April. We have a new guest, and we're entering the VC PE Private Investor Series. And today we've got Pedro. He's from FrissOn Capital, managing partner of FrissOn Capital. Have I said that right?
Yep.
So I'm going to hand it right over to you, Pedro. Who are you? What do you do? And why should anybody stay on this podcast for the next hour to listen to what you have to say? What kind of pain did that create for you and your business?
That's a very complicated question, but I guess I can sum it up by sharing that I've been an entrepreneur for the last 30 years. Never intended to. I just like fixing things. And I started that when I was in high school. I've created 20 companies so far. I'm a very curious person, so I like to study and learn different things, and that has led me to working at almost all industries. I've created marketing firms, biotech companies, cannabis products, space technology, biotech, one of my favorites. And for the last 4 years, approx, since we lost, we basically sold our baby, which was a company builder that we started in the 90s. It was, a difficult time for us because it was kind of like the passion project that the group that I work with, we've been working on for the last 25 years. So it was a great moment in a way because it led us to a soul searching moment to understand what was the next step. And that was when we understood that we've been entrepreneurs for a long time. We had been angel investing also for about, 15 years or so. And it was about time to go into VC space. VC space, as we see it today, is a very popular space in the global north. But in the global south, when you talk about deep tech, especially early stage, even though there are people saying that they're doing venture capital, they don't really like risk. And because of that, there's a massive loss of intellectual property and talent. So because of that, we decided to go into that space, creating a venture capital firm that is funding at a very early stage, so pre-seed and seed, deep tech developments. And we have right now two vehicles, one in Southeast Asia, based in Manila, focused on Web3, blockchain, AI, and another one for the Americas, focused on health.
Wow. So jam-packed, you've got a ton of experience. What I think a lot of people are interested in hearing from more of the VC leaders that we have, more of the private investor leaders that we have. What was where did you start? It's always interesting to hear a managing partner at a VC firm, but where did you start? Then at what point did you know, okay, maybe I was a C-level leader or a senior leader in a business and you took it to a certain level? And then after that, you had some wins and then you went and opened up your own kind of firm and became more, let's say, proficient in investing. Walk me through that journey.
So, when I hear some interviews of some peers, seems to me that they had already a plan in place. In my case, my journey has been very hectic. It has been based on curiosity and again, fixing things. So one of the things that I've come to realize throughout my years of entrepreneur is that I'm really good at lateral thinking, and I'm really good at starting projects where nobody's working at. And usually that's because it's not the space that nobody has seen. Because as you know, as an entrepreneur, when nobody's working at that space, probably means that nobody cares. But here is a bit different because we've always started projects that at the beginning seem almost impossible. And deep tech in Global South is almost impossible. So what happens there is that, especially what we're doing right now, we started analyzing data. Uh, and the personal journey was that we wanted to understand what was the next step. And it could have been whatever you can think of, an entertainment park, a law firm, a hamburger shop. We actually only look for places where we can make a difference. So it's not about a passion for a technology or an industry. It's
Hmm.
about doing something that really adds value, you know? So
Absolutely.
in this case, what we came to understand is that there has been this massive phenomena. I don't know if you've heard of it, that is called reverse innovation. And it comes for the last 10 years approx, uh, because most of the talented people from global south for the last 20, 30 years have been going to the global north to get their postgrads, and now they're back in the south. So you have the
Yes.
guys with the same knowledge of Oxford, Cambridge, UN University, etc. And the main difference basically is that they're developing in Peru or in Mexico or in Vietnam, and they
Hmm.
have almost the same infrastructure, maybe not as massive, but they have the same microscope, just one instead of the five that Germany has, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and they're developing state of the art technology that is now flooding the global market. So that reverse engineering comes from a lot of IP coming from the global south that
Hmm.
is now being used by big corps in the global north that are basically the ones that are thriving in the market. So for that
Absolutely. So,
reason, we're going
yeah.
to the source, you know, and funding those guys so that they can create the companies before the corporation purchases a patent that was underrated, that was uh, didn't have any more annuities and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. So, one thing I came across that I thought was really interesting, and I think a lot of people can take a lot of value from, is you've coached, I think it's 15,000 leaders globally. That's a
Yeah,
huge number. So,
it's
what
a
do you
huge
think?
number.
That is enormous. And I think mindset in coaching mindset seems to
Mhm.
be like the biggest thing to focus on. What do you think are the top mindset shifts you see in most of the leaders that you've coached today?
So you know, there's this very special moment that I I don't share this very often, but this is the magic, and this is what I do, what I why I do what I do. The coaching part, by the way, is I'm not a professional coach. Uh, I basically mentor and coach people that come and ask for advice. You know, so I don't do it as an income. And but there's this magic moment that happens depending on the type of program that we're running or the type of advising that we're doing. Uh, when you have, I think, a really sign of neuroplasticity. And it's a step when you're starting the conversation and you've been going through the topic many times, probably at least two or three times, the same thing, and the penny is just not dropping, and the person is getting super frustrated. And there's this moment that it's a human condition, I guess, because I've seen it all over the world, any industry, gender doesn't matter. People close their eyes a bit and tilt the head, and that's when you know the penny dropped. It's very interesting, and it's usually happening when they're giving you an answer, and I really love it because you just see that, you know, it's happening. It's a synapses actually biologically happening at that time, and they
Yeah,
just close their eyes a little bit and they tilt the head either way, you know,
yeah,
and they pause, and I
yeah.
that's that's why I do the coaching. It's really magic.
I think that's a really, really eye-opening moment. It only happened to me, I think, 2 years ago. I've gone through a lot of life coaching. My
Mhm.
first breakup with a fiance many moons ago, not really
Ooh.
two, about half a decade ago. Um,
Mhm.
it was a situation where she said, "You're the problem. You need to go get
Mhm.
help or counseling. I said, fine, I'm going to go get some coaching and I'm going to go get some help. She said, I've got this coach. Go have a chat with her. Had a chat with the coach. The coach said, get rid of that woman. And it ended up being the best 12-week course of my life because I transitioned into this amazing human. I got into the gym. I transformed my whole body. I transformed my whole mindset. I completely understood how things work differently when you take a different perspective, when you're not so selfish and, let's say, guilt-ridden attachment on a relationship. You say
Mhm.
that person can have something better instead of being guiltful that I might not be able to give her enough. Give her the freedom so she can have that. That means you can also have that. And those like mind shifting moments are so big because as time moved on, I started to realize that hardships that I went through resulted in massive wins 2 to 3 years later. And the ability to connect those dots were like, that is something that a lot of people aren't fortunate enough to understand. I'm very fortunate enough to land that kind of knowledge at the age of 38, discover it properly at the age of 36. But what it's helped me do in the business that I'm working with today. I'm probably the youngest guy in the business, but I'm able to execute as a seasoned leader because I always got coached by very, very experienced people. I always heard, don't ever ask a fat doctor how to get skinny. Just because you've got the qualifications doesn't mean he can tell you. And it was always show me the proof that you can do what you say you're going to do. And it ends up working really, really well. So I want to ask you, we're in a big shift. We've got Manus coming out. We've got Replit, all the language learning models. They're having huge innovation. So, how do you really advise some of your startups and even some legacy businesses to navigate disruption, stay relevant, especially when the industry is moving so fast? AI, for example, fintech, a second example.
Mhm. So one of the things that we really focus is on value, and I was blessed enough to work and learn from Clayton Christensen many years ago, and
Yeah,
that's when I just went crazy about jobs to be done theory. And
I
it's
love
so
that.
simple that it actually still is very very valid nowadays. We've been so in my history as an entrepreneur, I've been in the IT space for a while. I had two software factories. The first one went broke after 3 years, after trying to run it successfully, and then the second one we sold it about 18 months in the operation, so really quickly. And one of the things that this is, by the way, back in the .com bubble. So for me, I guess the same phenomenon that we're watching right now with AI. People sometimes go crazy about the tools and the toys, and they forget about the value. And that's the biggest focus that we want on our portfolio companies. It's not about, because obviously in the health space especially, everybody's talking about AI, and they almost forgot about molecules, and they forgot about curing diseases and that sort of thing, and everyone is adding the AI in the short sentence of the intro. And what we've told to people that either we're reviewing the company or that we're already invested in is that if they're going to be adding those sort of technologies into the product or into the process of the company, it better add value, because it's not just about saying you're riding the next wave. If there's not a direct value added to the customer, to the person that is actually paying for your salary, then it doesn't make sense. And I see that right now it's very confusing to try to add AI. Even the experts that we talk to, they usually come and recommend one tool one day, and 2 days after that, there's a new thing from a new tool.
Hmm.
The competition between Gemini, Perplexity, uh, uh,
Love it.
X, and all that stuff. And I, again, if you're actually trying to do something, then you better add that tool because it's in direct impact to your customer. And it could be an internal process, of course. It doesn't have to be part of the core of the product. But if it doesn't add value, then don't distract yourself. It's going to take too long to understand what's going on in the market, I think.
I like that. So you mentioned Clayton Christensen, and another name came up, Salim Ismail.
Mm.
Um, so, given your experience with some of those frameworks, working with
Mm.
people like that, how should financial institutions, we're going to be opening up our solution to financial institutions in the next few
Mhm.
months, how should financial institutions approach exponential technologies like AI?
You know, I at some point in my life I sold checkbooks, and I really enjoyed it. I worked for a big bank, and uh, for me it's one of the industries that, even though there's a lot of fintech out there, it hasn't been disrupted yet. I think there's a lot to happen yet in the financial space. And one of the things that I learned working with these guys is that uh, I understand that companies are built to protect a business model, but nobody protects a business model like financial dudes. It's crazy. Uh, it brings me, kind of like back to medieval times. These guys just actually, have a sword, and they're ready to kill anybody that goes against the model. And it's interesting because when you talk about external technologies, there was a project that I wanted to do with the bank. We wanted to implement a CRM, and we had this massive opportunity because we came across a company that you probably know called Microsoft. And these guys told us, we're about to launch the next generation of our CRM, and we're willing to share it with you and develop the next generation with you for free if you let us go into the guts of the bank, because we want to understand what the hell is going on with the financial market. We do not
Mhm.
have built modules and all the stuff based on financial industry. So we want to do that. And the answer of my boss was, no, we're going to do a CRM ourselves, and it's going to be better than Microsoft. Uh, so
Wow.
long story short, I left the bank 5 years after that, and they hadn't even started building the damn thing. And they ended up building it. It took them like 3 years. And I think they invested about like $20 million or something like that. And they just declared it a fail in the bank, and they ended up hiring another CRM. But that's the type of mentality in the banks, and they always talk about, security of the systems, of the tools, and all that stuff. Now, obviously, cybersecurity, and yeah, I think there's a massive opportunity to do change in those institutions, especially the big ones.
So, for those that don't know, those I should have asked this earlier, but those that don't know those two names, Clayton Christensen, can you just give and Salim Ismail, can you give two quick descriptions of who they are?
Oh, sure. So Clayton was the guy that actually invented the word disruption. Uh, and he was the head of innovation and business in Harvard Business School. And among the many things that he did, was that he came up with this theory of what is called nowadays jobs to be done. And it comes from the value that a specific thing gives to a person. He came up with that doing a research project for McDonald's, the sandwich
Yep.
shop.
Yep.
And interesting because these guys had a phenomenon in a shop where they were trying to understand why that specific shop, different than all the other 1,000 shops in the world, was selling more milkshakes, and all of them were sold in the morning instead of coffee and egg sandwiches. And it
Mm.
turns out that people were buying milkshakes because the shop had an automac. It was very close to a suburban area, and they had a 40-minute commute to the offices. So actually, the breakfast was the milkshake, because when you have a sandwich, the risk of getting dirty with ketchup and all that is very high, and you don't want to go dirty into your work. And then the
Hmm.
coffee didn't last 40 minutes. So that's how he came up with the job to be done theory. And the guy basically just transformed the way in which we think about business models. Salim is one of the founders of Singularity University, which is, I think, one of the educational institutions of innovation across the globe, along with Peter Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil. And based on all the stuff that they were doing, because he was also the executive director of Singularity at the beginning, and based on all the stuff that they were doing based on exponential technologies, he developed this framework that is closer to organizational processes, which is called Exponential Organizations. And he wrote the book on 2014, which is, from my understanding, one of the most read books in the business community. And then he invited the community to rewrite the book a couple of years ago. So if you want to go deeper into that, the last version of the book, I think it was released back in like 21 or 22. It's fantastic because it includes a lot of stuff related to AI.
I would look if the it is so crazy how just hearing jobs to be done from yourself was a framework I learned when I started my business. So I had, and I'll share a link in this in the description so people can know what this is. But I think it's quite an interesting thing whether you're at the lower level of the spectrum pole and you're working just starting out, or you're at the higher end and you may not know. Some people I've spoken to, they don't know what jobs to be done are, and they don't know you are active, whether you're actively looking makes, but no, they just should be bank qualified leads. Every single one of them, you should just get bank qualified leads, right? But they don't know everybody's in a different stage of their buying cycle. And until I knew, I was selling flogging webinars, right? Corporate webinars for oil and gas service companies trying to get into EPC companies. The only thing I had to say was, I'm selling you qualified leads. When I built a business and an agency and I had to speak to CEOs of those businesses and explain to them how this works, how appointment setting works at a higher level, and to get into why you're not getting bank qualified leads in the first 2 weeks is because we need to understand the psychographic element, firmographic, technographic, every single element of a human profile, and then to understand where they are in their journey. That really helped me. That was a really, really big eye opener for me. Exponential Organizations I've not heard, and I've not heard of Salim Ismail. So you unpacked it a little bit. Can you just unpack it a little bit more on what Exponential Organizations is, and what would somebody learn if they read that book?
So the framework is very, very simple to ideate. Implementation is another thing, of course, but it's based on the concept created by Peter that is called massive transformative purpose, which is a simplified version of what you want to do either with your life or as an organization. And based on the MTP, you analyze 10 different attributes that you can add to your organization, either working with a community or automatizing projects with interfaces, or leveraging assets that are critical to your business model. But instead of buying them and decapitalizing yourself, you just rent them. It has stuff related to algorithms, engagement with the audiences that you're going to be working with. Experimentation is one of the attributes of the organization, critical, for a quick iteration. And it has this canvas when you could see 13 building blocks, the 10 attributes, the MTP, and 2 related to implementation. And the concept is very interesting because there's a guy in the community. So there's a community, for starters, called OpenXO, where there's a lot of people, both experts and enthusiasts of exponential organizations. And there's a guy there, financial individual, expert in business things, coaching from Switzerland, and he did a study from public companies that implemented the exponential framework. And it's very interesting. I don't remember the precise numbers, but the ROI and the growth and the acceleration, etc., the numbers are staggering. You have like 10 times the revenue and 4.6 times the return of investment. And it's really impressive. And what Salim says with the framework is that if you're building a startup, you better start as an exponential organization. He's very close to a guy called David Rose. I don't know if you heard of him, but this is the guy that basically created the category of angel investing. Super famous investor from New York, fantastic guy. And David has this phrase that says that if your business was built on principles of the 20th century, then it's not going to work on the 21st. The interesting thing of the phrase, because the phrase is kind of catchy, and but the interesting thing of the phrase is that if you analyze the models that business schools are teaching nowadays in 2025, they were created in 75, 50 years ago. All of them.
That's great.
So think about that, You're paying a massive tuition in a super relevant, well-known business school, and these guys are teaching you things that you find in a public library. And the actual knowledge that is being used by the guys that are surviving, if not thriving today, they don't share that with you because they don't know it.
I think it's actually crazy the fact that I wasn't paying too much attention to it. I've just had a baby not too long ago. She's going on 3.5 now, and I'm
Congrats.
evaluating some schools. It's a great time. She's now starting to get. The other day I said, hold my sandwich. I want to pick up my Pepsi, and she said, Dad, you have another hand. Use your. I was just like, wow, all right, this is really cool. But I'm evaluating schools, and I was wondering, like, in 15, 20 years, my daughter's going to be in college, and I was learning from people. I don't mean to be horrible or sound this, but it's just as you learn, like common sense isn't too common. But as you grow up, you think, I was being taught how to be successful from somebody who's not successful.
Yeah.
How does that make sense?
Yeah.
If kids nowadays have access to GPT and they can consume, digest, comprehend a ton of knowledge faster than their teachers even know what to do with it, why are we learning from teachers on these, again, outdated models? It's very, very strange. Um, One name you came up with that I thought was so interesting. I'm super addicted to the Moonshots podcast right now and some of the new Peter Diamandis interviews he's done. Please tell me how you met Peter Diamandis. Tell the audience who he is a little bit, and then what kind of experience have you had with him and learned from him?
This is gonna blow your mind. So the I've been a fan of Peter for forever. I read
Yeah.
the Bold book, and it really literally changed my life, and that led me to the path of going into exponential technologies. And so my wife manages the backstage of a massive event created by the Slim family, Carlos Slim, who's a
Okay.
very successful business guy in Mexico.
Yeah.
So they have this event every September where they have keynotes for all the people that they're providing scholarships to. And they rent this massive auditorium in Mexico City where they have 20,000 people from the scholarship system of the foundation that they have. And you have one guy in entertainment and one guy in sports and one guy in personal growth and so on and so forth. And after that, they usually invite us to dinner with the keynotes. So when I met Peter, I was at a dinner party with Carlos Slim, John Travolta, and Peter.
Wow.
It was crazy. It was a surreal moment for me. And of course, I told my wife before she took me to dinner that I was not going to behave because I needed to talk to the guy and I needed an autograph and I was going to embarrass her for sure. And I took my book, which, was all scrabbled in, and I
Yeah.
just sat with the guy and I had dinner with the guy for 2 hours. It was fantastic.
He is incredible. The guests that he's have is absolutely incredible. I can't believe you've actually met him, and I'm talking to somebody who's actually been to dinner with him. So, one thing, another thing, like these are, I'm so happy you're on today. I've got so many questions, but you collaborated with a bunch of global institutions, some of them being WIPO, IDB, NSF. What role did you see policy and regulation playing in shaping responsible AI use in finance and debt recovery?
That's gonna be difficult, because in my experience, regulation always follows reality, and I guess in a way we're seeing it right now. Europeans, I believe, are more cautious and more conscientious about the use of technology, and some of the regulations that the UE created, I think, have slowed down a bit the use of AI. Americans usually just go, full throttle. And I guess that's the difference that we're seeing right now in the market. And obviously, Asians, I mean, China, it just goes all the way into technology. I think at some point in time, it's going to be old news, probably 10, 15 years from now. And by then, that it's going to be, I guess, broadly used. It should be time for people to start discussing about the regulation of AI. Let me share an example with you. 25 years ago, I was advising the Mexican government on a law that came out of Cartagena Protocol, which was the biosafety international treaty for GMOs.
Mm-hmm.
So back in those days, the conversation was basically what's going to happen with biotech. Are we going to be able to clone things? The British started talking about cloning sheep. So this is like 4 or 5 years before Dolly, that you probably heard of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it hadn't happened yet. And in the middle of the conversation with the deputies, the legislative low chamber of Mexico, this deputy shares an email that she received from her niece saying that Kentucky Fried Chicken sold cloned chickens, that they were basically balls of muscle that were connected to tubes. This is a rumor that some person started. This is again 25 years ago. There was no 3D
Yeah,
printing of protein,
of course.
And it was not a visionary. This was just somebody trying to throw shit at KFC, right? It took us 3 hours of the conversation with some of the brightest minds in Latin America to make the lady understand that it was scientifically impossible to do such a thing. And if it were the case, it would be cleaner because of the process, the meats, right? But this is the type of conversations that I've seen happen on and on in legislative branches. I was able to participate in other biotech regulation processes. I was part of a group in the European Union called Biotech Ethics. So we work with the European countries, and we even advise some African countries in biotech. And those were the types of conversations that we were having. So a lot of science fiction, non-fact, discussing stuff of how to regulate what could be possible. And I think it's going to happen the same thing with AI. So real regulations are going to start happening probably in about 10, 15 years, when we actually understand what the hell is AI and what you can actually do with AI. It's a lot of speculation.
It really is. And I think so. Like one of the things that we're battling right now is we're working in an industry that seems to be late adopters of technology. So when you do have a traditional company that is ready to adopt AI, what do you think are the key indicators that shows they are ready for an operational transformation?
I think everybody's ready to adopt AI. It's just the difference probably depends on how many tools and how much percentage wise of the operation goes into AI.
Yeah,
I've been in rooms and boards and conversations with CEOs saying that they want to apply AI to the business so that they can fire 40% of the workforce. It
it's not going to
doesn't work
work.
that way. Somebody has to tell the guy that we're not there yet for starters. And second of all, it wouldn't be ethical, but it's a process, I guess.
What do you think about having, let's say, descriptive, established foundational systems and processes in a business before you start saying, you can't just say, I want to put AI into my business. You have to know what is the first function? How am I going to apply it? What is the iteration strategy? Where does it go? What does perfect look like? So, what do you think about system and process? How developed should systems and processes be at an
I
operational level before you
definitely
get
think
involved?
that you have to do that. I've seen two types of of IT implementation in companies. Uh,
Hmm.
the one that never works is when somebody buys the last shiny thing, and they
Yeah.
buy this massive technology that is super popular in the market. The guys in the team have no idea of how to use it. They buy $1 million license and then another million in adaptation of modules. It takes them a year, and then nobody knows how to use it, or they prefer to use the spreadsheet that they were using before that. So it actually becomes on reworks. The other way that I've seen that is successfully implemented is when you actually do a process mapping of the business and you adapt the technology to how the business is working. So if you had carte blanche, I would say probably the first thing would be to map your processes and then to contrast that with best practices. Because it could be the case that those are your processes, but they're not aligned to ISO, for example. And once you have that aligned to ISO and you have a culture that follows those processes that are best practices, then you should implement the software. But just putting in the software and imagining that that's going to change the culture of the organization and the way they do business, that never works.
Who would you say, or what source or resource would you be advising founders, CEOs to go to understand what best practice is nowadays?
I would go to an AI. I would go to GPT. I would go to Gemini. I would go to Perplexity and say, hey, I'm in this business. I am in this stage. I'm trying to do this thing. What the hell can I do? Give me best practices and map my route so that I can implement these things in 6 months from now.
So out of the two that I battle with, I don't even consider Google anymore. GPT is in my eyes. I do use it every day.
Mhm.
Manus has been incredible. I've been flirting with Manus for a while. But out of GPT and Perplexity, which of those is your go-to to find up-to-date real-time information?
I've been using for a while Perplexity. I love it, and I just
Yep.
started using the last model of Gemini, and I like it as well.
Which one do you think is more up-to-date though? Because they're giving different outputs. I'm seeing that they're giving very different outputs.
Probably I would bet on Perplexity.
I like that. All right. Last two questions. What is your playbook for identifying AI startups that are worth investing in, especially if you're not from a technical background?
I always talk to geeks. I always have friends that are smarter than we are, and those guys help us find them, help us evaluate them, and help us do the negotiations. We always go to experts, and usually people that are not popular, but everybody knows who they are.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's the strategy that we've been doing since the beginning.
What are the three innovation traps you see a lot of companies falling into when they're integrating AI?
I guess
And how can they avoid them?
so. One of the things about AI right now is that I think it's a trend too popular with people that actually don't understand what it actually is. And that is a big problem for the organizations. Because from my understanding, it can help you do some things, but there are other things that will never be done with AI, at least with the technology that we have today. Uh,
Hmm.
but some of the people that are calling the shots right now don't understand the depth or the use of the technology, and they're trying to implement it in everything. And usually those guys are more vertical than the others, and they like yelling a lot. So people under them, even though they know better, they're afraid to speak out. And that's when the mess starts, because you have a guy saying, hey, I want to implement this thing because I went to, a dinner party and a friend of mine told me that this is going to be massive, so we should implement it right now. And everybody's afraid to tell the boss that technology is not ready, or the organization is not going to adapt because it's a different industry or whatever. Eh, I guess those are the hustles that we're dealing with right now.
Okay. And then the last segment is a rapid fire. You have 30 seconds to answer four questions. Okay. We'll start off with the first one. Biggest myth about AI and business.
Mhm.
What's your answer to that? Biggest myth about AI and business today?
I guess that I just read it a couple of days ago. Some billionaires saying that in 10 years there are going to be no teachers and no doctors.
Well, if expertise is free, what do you pay for?
I don't think it could be for something like early stage diagnosis,
Yeah.
but as no doctors is a mouthful.
Oh, well, I'll give you a quick example. I still have it a little bit, but 2 weeks ago, I was on the sofa and I felt my eye and it kept getting bigger. And my wife had prawns that day. So I thought I had an allergic reaction from giving my wife a kiss, but it wasn't that. And then I thought it might be a spider bite. And it wasn't. And it got bigger and bigger. And then my eye started to fall over, honestly. So I took a picture of my eye, and over the over the progress of the day that it got worse and then better. I said, "What is this? I think I got bit." It wasn't a bite. It was an allergic reaction. It's called a chalazon, which is a clogged oil buildup in my eyebrow.
Wow.
Like, and it was exactly right from taking a
Yeah,
picture
yeah,
of
yeah.
GPT and saying, "What the hell is on my eye?" It's incredible. So, again, where I think AI is getting everybody 10% to 20% of the way there, and then you kind of have to finish the journey,
Ah,
and that's where like human expertise I see
exactly.
being a big benefit.
Uh-huh.
What's the most underrated book for innovators?
Underrated book. Hmm. Ah, this one is fantastic.
Okay. Superabundance
Yeah,
by Marissa.
by Tupi and Puli. These are two economists from the Cato Institute. A
Okay.
fantastic book because it shows you in numbers back from like the 1800s or something like that, 1700s, that the world is actually better every day. It's fantastic.
I
It's
like
it's
that one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's brilliant because it's not the typical positive dude on a stage talking about how good we are living nowadays. It's actually the
Hmm.
backup of the numbers of every commodity and every product that you can buy in the market, all the history of how the world is better nowadays. I love that book.
Amazing. Two more questions. What's one mistake every startup should make early just to learn from it?
Probably just go crazy about your technology. The sooner the better. You need to geek out
Okay,
at some point in time. The sooner the better.
beautiful. And last question to wrap it up. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received from anybody that really it transformed your life into something new?
It's very zen, but it actually works. Breathe before you react.
I like that one. Mine has been trust the process. Enjoy the
I
ride.
love that. Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to wrap it up. So, Pedro, thank you so much. I really do appreciate your time. I will be including all of your LinkedIn links, the company links, any type of resources that you have, send them over, and I'm going to include those in the description. Is there any lasting words that you have for those that are watching you? Where can they find you, speak to you, learn more? Anything interesting on your agenda that you want people to know about?
I'm a regular speaker at some summits related to technology, entrepreneurship, and innovation. But the easiest way to connect with me is social media: LinkedIn, Facebook, and X.
Awesome. Well, thank you very, very much. I appreciate your time and I hope to see you soon. That's a wrap for today.
Thank you. Take care, Shane.